talk about some tech issues on this show. G'day, it is the coach here with Down Under Sigmar. If you're watching this on YouTube live, hello. If you watch this on a podcast, it means that I'm probably going to get off my ass and finally release this on an audio file. As always, we are here with my co-host, the villainous himself, Liam. How are you, good sir?
I'm sweet, man. How are you?
Good. Are you still going around with the alias of the villain, or are you still trying to shred it?
I think I'm pretty good. Like, I don't think I've caused any. Me and Clint were just talking about this earlier. I haven't caused any drama at all this year. And he says other people are doing it for you, and I say it's great because I get to eat popcorn and watch the world burn. It's great, and then they get to be hated.
So you need a new nickname, or you need to start throwing salt and firing up.
I think I'll stick with Cranky Lim, which was what I was like known before the villain, where I get really salty during my games, like we did at the first Masters, where I raged at Chris Welfare, and I think we all remember that quite well.
Yeah, you're getting salty at me when my free people were shooting off your trees, but hey, good to have you back. And the chat is already giving it to Clint. They're asking Clint, why have you got pictures of yourself on your wall? G'day, Clint. People that don't know who you are, let them know. They've probably never been to CanCon, but who are you, man?
Clint from the Heralds of War podcast and TO of the Age of Sigmar event at CanCon, the world's largest singles AOS event. And lover of all things James Bond, as you can see.
And Manfred, I've been having fights with Mr. Mephisto today, who was ragging on Manfred, and I was fighting him for you. So, Liam, watch your mouth. I'll mute you if you talk about Manfred like that. And I've got to say that's a really poor introduction for myself. I've been watching some YouTube videos on how I should introduce guests, and I should be leading it as opposed to throwing it over to my guests like that. So I'm going to try this with Nick. I'm going to introduce Nick Hoen. He is probably the voice you'd recognize on the Dwellers Below, an OG Warhammer player from Fantasy. He's back. He came second or third at CanCon, has done really well with the Death Allegiance, whether it's Night Haunt, whether it's Legions of Nick Ash. And my God, you are a beautiful man. How are you, Nick?
Not too bad. Thank you very much.
I really can't take it seriously with Smorgan's face.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing the Smorgan. If you watch this on a podcast, you probably should be watching us live on YouTube. So, Nick, it's good to have you. And I guess today, the reason I've got both Clint and Nick here is because you both have run some of Australia's largest AOS events. You've obviously attended a lot of events, and we want to talk TO talk. We want to talk about how do you set up a great event? How do you run a great event? What are those tips, hints, tricks that you guys have learned along the way, whether it's to market the event, whether it's to build that players pack, to speak to sponsors, to wrap it all up in a nice little bow. How do you run a great event? Liam, I know you've run an event last year as well, and certainly people might know that I'm running an event next month, and I am shiting myself just with the amount of terrain that I have to build.
But you have people helping you out with that, so it's fine.
Most people, Liam's still on his first batch of terrain.
Helping.
Well, he's doing more help to me than he did to you, Clint. What happened to you at CanCon this year with Liam?
I'll help you, Clint. Oh, I've also bought a ticket. I'm playing now. That's pretty much what happened.
Well, we'll see what happens.
All is forgiven.
My thing was the opposite. I bought a ticket and then I said, screw it, I'll help you out. That's what I did to Anthony. So I think I have improved. That's a good step.
You are definitely improving. Nick, you're no stranger to dead weight as well. I hear you did most of the hard work at I want to say Border War. What was your event? Bloody hell!
Lords of War.
Lords of War. Border Wars. Lords of War. There's so many just unique names.
To be fair, there was some dead weight in the team leading up to the event, but after the Saturday night, I was sort of dead weight on the Sunday morning. So some people helped me out then. So to be fair, but I know where you're coming from.
To credit the boys on the stream, they talked a lot of shit for a long time. It was good value.
It's what we do.
Lockie did the most work, right?
Yeah. In bed on Sunday morning and rocked up at 1 p.m.
Solid.
Yeah. All right. We should probably crack the what's Doom Darkness say? Crack the fire, light the tires. let's get into today's show. So, have you guys had any games recently? What's in the news? What's happened, Liam? Give us an update since we've last had a show.
Pretty much news-wise,
Had any games playing?
Yeah, we had a game. Me and Nick played. I was down in Melbourne last week, and we played a game. It was actually a pretty good game. I lost, but I learnt that Corn can be really puck you to magic because I didn't cast a spell at all, at all. So yeah, it was good. We played Starstrike, didn't we?
Yeah, it was Starstrike, the new one.
Yeah, the new one.
Did you have the that prayer, that stops the spells, the skulls?
Yeah, the judgment. Yeah, the what are they called? The skulls of Corn. We'll go with that. Hex Scourger skulls. Yeah, they were really strong. So I was running that. I had a Wrath of Corn Bloodthirster and the terrain and a couple of blood priests. So potentially neg 3 on his casting, +2 on my unbinding, with a few unbinds. So yeah, anti-magic was pretty strong.
Yeah, and I couldn't do anything about those judgments because they're not magic. So
if it makes you feel any better, I played Doom and Darkness and he threw those judgment down at me. And because I've got 4 wound grot wizards, and I decided in one turn to roll 2 8s. So I decided to pop all my wizards.
That is not good.
Best idea ever.
Yeah.
But no, it was a great game. And then I had a quick 20-minute rundown game with Danny Paints. And with his beautiful KO, that guy is a freak of nature, and he's not even close to finish, and it still looks better than the stuff that I make. So, yeah, it was good. Good day of gaming. Good day of hanging out with some legends, and yeah, that's news with me with gaming. How about yourself?
Well, let's ask our guest, Nick. Have you played any games other than that practice warm up against Liam?
Age of Sigmar wise, no. So I've been in Europe. Well, I mean, I played at Blackout in the start of August over in the UK, and then I've been holidaying my way around Europe. So I haven't played too many games.
How was Blackout?
Blackout was amazing. It was a really good event. It was great to catch up with a bunch of the old mates from the Warhammer days, and I just love playing international Age of Sigmar, which was what I was doing that weekend, and. Yeah, nearly managed a podium. Just missed out in the last round, losing to one of the old boys, Brian Carmichael. Blackout was awesome. Great time catching up. Yeah, played Liam last week when he was down, which was good to catch up, and played a whole bunch of Warcry last week as well. So Warcry is currently my jam. I'm very much keen on that at the moment. So yeah, that's been my hobby really.
And who are you playing in Warcry?
I played some games with one of my mates, Ben Leopold, who used to play 8th Ed Fantasy, and with Nick Gentili.
Nice. And any particular warband?
I've been running the Untamed Beasts, but I've also got the Splintered Fang, which I'm going to try out. Long term, I think I want to buy them all and just paint them up to a good standard and just put them in a display cabinet, even if I don't play that many games with them, because I think the models are fantastic. And I've always loved that kind of chaos aesthetic, and yeah, that's what I'm all about.
Oh, awesome. And Clint, yourself?
Just had a mind break. I don't know.
I mean, you've got Toowoomba GT coming up. You've got Sydney GT coming up. Surely you've been practicing.
No. I don't
He has
practice.
a single terrain.
I've been working on terrain. I haven't been playing Warhammer. Yeah, I don't know when the last time I had a game was. So, yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sure there's one game of you on the Foul Charge, though, which I think was recorded a month ago.
That was recorded a while ago, and I think I've covered that off on the Heralds already. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Well, I had a Sydney GT warm-up on the weekend. I played one gentleman. It was a great game. Played Jake with a 2,500 point game. I brought out the free people with the Carmine Dragon, so it was really a Tempest Eye formation, which was really cool. Double Chicken or the Griffins. It was good to get the free people back and dust off those cobwebs, and really inspired to get the Cities of Sigmar book. And which is why, Liam, we're not going to talk about the news, because every friggin' Monday when Games Workshop release what's coming up on the schedule, it's not Cities of Sigmar, it's not War Clans, it's not More Tribes. So everything else is dead to me.
But those skeleton boys, they look so pretty.
F them, F Gordrak, F everyone that is in Cities of Sigmar.
Does anyone else get sad messages from Anthony on a Monday morning going, "Where's my cities book?"
I think he sent me one, and then I didn't really say much about it, and I think he hasn't done it again.
I'm sympathetic to his plight, so it must be why I keep going.
Because it's going to be another Stormcast battle time.
Stop picking on me.
But besides that, other news, there is Age of Sigmar Underworlds, but that's pretty much it, really. It's not Cities of Sigmar, but yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that you're really upset.
That's all right. It's actually probably a good thing because I would not be able to focus. Hey, we got Nick. We got rid of that Smorgan icon, and we have the beautiful man that is Nick.
We did it. Happy days.
As my my hero on my performance review would say, great success.
Great success.
Very nice. All right, we're going on a weird tangent.
Is that where we're going? Is that
what's your best Borat, Clint?
No. It's just not happening.
Liam, you got one for us?
I have. Don't hate me, guys, but I've never watched it. No idea. Don't hate me.
That's fine. Clint might not do Borat, but he has actually promised to do some karaoke at Sydney GT with Sam Morgan. A bit of a Dolly Parton song, I reckon he's going for.
Oh.
Wait, Smorgan's going to karaoke? He bailed last time.
I'm counting on that, Liam. So don't.
No, not happening. But yeah, besides that, I think we can go on to the next topic, which is
Liam's cracking the whip. Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Now?
Who's the host of this show?
Some of our guests have to be somewhere. So.
It's only taken you 6 months to get this point where you started taking the lead. So
I don't know, mate. I don't know, Clint. Would you allow this kind of uprising on your show? I know I wouldn't on mine.
No, I'd absolutely edit it out.
Well, I've already heard Liam has been encouraged to apply for the Dwellers, so I am waiting for his resignation from this show and to join your fine cast of merry men.
I did one shot at Lords of War, but apparently made me a Dweller. Have not done anything else.
Actually, you've got a Herald's polo as well, so you're a bit of a content creator slut.
To be honest, we kind of gave me that polo shirt just to really trigger some people, and it worked.
It did. Did.
We did our job, and I haven't really worn it since.
All right. Well, people we're not going to trigger is the Patreon, so I'm going to move us forward and thank everyone who is contributing to the show. It is going a long way. Something that I announced last fortnight was that I am starting to build out a introduction to Sigmar series of videos. So your support and everyone who's jumping on board, whether it's my assistant coaches like Kenny and Chaos Spawn, whether it's the amazing amount of tournament nutritionists, the hobby physios, the talent scouts, your support is appreciated. Wrapping things up, we've got some fresh content. Mortally Wounded's put out a recent podcast. Bush Radio always put out a great podcast. Herald's kind of dragging the ball and chain here. I think your last one was about almost a month ago. Your mum's a faction.
It was 2 weeks ago. Calm down.
That's too long. That's too long. We need more Clint.
Fine.
Seems like most things on YouTube these days are bat reps, whether it's Failed Charge, Doom and Darkness put out some bat reps, Measured Gaming, Cinder4 Gaming's in the bat reps now. He put out a great show with Mr. Bigwood around Why Tender Tournament, but he's also putting out some bat reps. Clint, does it freak you out that Aussie Wargamer is now starting to put out the road to CanCon, knowing that you are the man who runs CanCon and the content is starting to come out?
No, I think it's awesome. It shows that people are putting in the effort and are excited. That's what makes it awesome. People are excited.
I just feel like it's a countdown to all of the terrain and good stuff that you need to build in preparation for the world's largest event.
You're just saying that to take your mind off your terrain.
I've got 2 weeks. Speaking of events, we've got Toowoomba Open coming up. I don't know if they're still selling tickets. I need to change that because Moab Team Tournament has flipped out to a Warcry tournament that Ben Spinetti and Liam are running. I'm just going to take this off for a second. I don't know what you guys think of this, but I've recently been printing out these these like Warcry 8-inch kind of combat gauges, which seem pretty cool. And we've obviously got Sydney GT coming up, HeroCon in Brisbane in December, and then obviously CanCon. CanCon, when are tickets out, Mr. Clint?
1st of October was the last update I had, and I've been pushing them to confirm that and to give me a time as well. So
yes, please, because I'm actually flying to a regional location that day. So if I get off my regional flight and there are no tickets, I will lose my mind.
I'll have another helper, is what you mean.
That'll actually freak me out. I booked my accommodation 6 months ago, so if I don't get a ticket, I will cry.
That's why you get someone else to buy your ticket, Anthony. It's called a backup plan.
All right, well, you're not the person. I don't trust you to buy my ticket. You'll forget.
You know what? Fair call. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's a fair call.
There's one more event that I want to talk about, and actually, it's not even me who's going to talk about it. I want to throw it over to our fine guests here, Clint and Nick, who want to talk a bit about the ETC.
Yep. Do you want to go first, Nick, or you happy for me?
No, you lead it off.
Right. So the ETC, European Team Championships, is a Age of Sigmar teams event that's held every year at different locations within Europe. It's basically it's been going, I think, since 2006 or something like that. It's like been going for about 13, 14 years. It's basically the World Cup of Warhammer. And once upon a time, Australia used to send fantasy battle teams, and Age of Sigmar has started to be a part of it. And so Nick and I and some other folks have started to talk about getting together an Australian team to send over next year for 2020, which is in Luxembourg. So it's quite a big teams environment, a big corporate, I'm trying to think of, it's a fairly friendly environment. Teams from all around the world. England won this year. Next year it'll be Australia for sure.
It's a long history of the ETC, right? Yeah, I think I've seen. I don't know how long it's been around, but you could type that into Google and it brings up. I was watching a video from Objective Secure, one of our friends over in WA, and it was a video from him in the ETC for 40K, early 2000s. So it's got a long history. Nick, I think you've played in it before. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to represent Australia 4 times at the ETC. So my first one was in 2012 in Poland, and then I played the next two, 13 and 14, were in Serbia, and then 2015 in Prague, if I've got my years right. So yeah, and it's a fantastic weekend, and I'm really, really keen to see an Australian team go over there again this year, because it's great having a team that represents our scene and our game, particularly given how big the Australian scene is now. I mean, even compared to the Warhammer Fantasy days, Australia was a much smaller scene on the world scale than it is now. We've got Clint's running the biggest Age of Sigmar event in the world, like actually the biggest. And the amount of 2-day big events that we're got in Australia is great. So why shouldn't we be represented on the world stage?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's been this, history of the ETC, and since Sigmar came out, it's something that we haven't really dabbled into. It seemed like this year that was the first year that we've properly committed. It sounded like everyone who went there had a great time. I was following the Americans and the Brits quite extensively, and they had an absolute ball. And I've seen they're already kind of getting applications out trying to form a Team America. And I could see in the chat here, people are already throwing names like, getting, Dave Kerr, for example, in the team. So how do we get into this ETC team? What's it all about?
Okay, so we will be putting up some more information about exactly what ETC is, the application process, and selections and all that sort of stuff. That'll be going up in the next day or two. Through the Heralds of War, I'll put it through the Facebook page, and then I think Nick will share it through the Dwellers as well. And we'll just make sure that we get it out to all the different sort of communities in Australia, and make sure that people know that they can apply and try and join this team and have a fantastic weekend in Luxembourg next year. But more details in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's an application process and
absolutely,
there's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, so it's not just about taking the most kick-ass, putting six of the best players, like the top 6 players in the rankings together and sending them all off. It's all about being a team player and being able to commit to the event and things like that as well. So all that'll be sort of listed out for people so that they can make sure that they are able to commit and want to be a part of the team. So.
And is the only roles in the team playing roles? Like, is that the only things that are available?
Nick, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so it's not the only role. So in short, last year or this year, the Age of Sigmar AOS teams were 6-player teams. So you'll have 6 players, and then you've got an optional, and one of those 6 one of the players in the team has to be a captain, and the captain is the nominal kind of leader responsible for getting the score sheet in each round and stuff like that. But you can also have a non-playing coach who can also be the captain. So you can have a non-playing captain. And so Tom Maudsley over in the UK, he was the English non-playing coach and captain. And so his role each round was managing the team and looking at all the games and figuring out who's winning, who's losing, where do we need to get points, where do we need to just hold the result we've got. And so it's actually an amazingly important role, because you look at your game and it's an individual game, you're playing one-on-one, but the coordination across the 6 tables, potentially 8 tables, depending if they raise it to 8, which is what it is for 40K and was for fantasy, and the coordination across the tables is amazingly important. But to be honest, in the past, we've taken an ETC barman, and that's probably the most important role for the Australian team, is to have the ETC barman, and they just someone who comes along, basically gets drinks and keeps the players hydrated, a bit like the movie Waterboy, but with beer. And that's probably the pinnacle of where you can go for Warhammer in Australia, is to be the barman for the ETC team, because you basically just fly across the world and have a massive piss up and just drinking and hanging out with awesome people. So, but like the German team back in the day would have a team psychologist, and so that he would come along, and these are all excuses for people to come have a piss up at the end of the day. But in theory, he was just there to motivate players and be like, because it's funny, it's pretty intense Warhammer, and some people, some very good players have had somewhat of a meltdown in the past. And shout out to Tom Maudsley in our Ashes game. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. I have no idea what that reference is, but I'm sure he's a champion. I think looking at some of the chat, I can see Matt Davis is already very keen to be your bar wench. Tyson Gleason is asking about the official documentation around selection for ETC. And I think given that obviously these are the Australian representatives, I believe each country who is sending a team would have a different process. I know I was reading the application from America, and a very important question in there is does pineapple belong on pizza? If I was Bel Souza and anyone put no, they'd instantly be cut from the team. So I believe, Clint, Nick, is that true that each team will have a different process and a criteria on selecting that team member?
Yes. Basically, the ETC provides sort of basic guidelines around nationality and the percentage makeup of a team that has to be from Australia, et cetera, et cetera. But the rest of the sort of selections are left up to the country. So there's some official guidelines that you have to sort of abide by, and then it's really up to the country to sort out the rest. So,
yeah, awesome. Well, I think Nick, go. Sorry.
Yeah, different countries do it in different ways. It's been the way the English are doing it's pretty good. They nominate a captain at the start, and then they just have a pre-announced selection committee of kind of people who are well established in the community who help pick the team. And you want to have a kind of non-biased committee that picks the team. in the past, we've used rankings to determine half the team, and then that half picks the other half, but that didn't work great. It's always been very interesting over in the US how they do it, because they've got such a huge scene. It's divided geographically, even more than ours is in Australia with that east-west. And so it's always very interesting to see how the US guys do it. But at the end of the day, as long as you've got transparency and it's all fair, then that's the way to do it. And honestly, just determining pizza toppings is probably the way we're going to go, I reckon.
And you are on pro pizza, I'm assuming?
I'm definitely pro pizza.
And then pro pineapple on that pizza?
Probably 2 pro pizza at the moment, given how my weight's going. But yes, pro pineapple, obviously.
Beautiful. Just making sure that you are a pizza and a pineapple person. So,
Oh my god, I'm going to kill someone.
all right.
Liam is anti-pineapple.
And
Yeah.
Liam, don't even bother applying for the team, mate.
And if anyone on Patreon wants to give me some free boosts and they want to really boost up my Patreon account, I'm sure there is a coach role in the Australian team.
There is a coach role.
I mean,
Is
isn't that meta? The coach comes in a coaching role.
That's it.
Or if I don't
That's
take
fine.
it up, then I have to give it up.
GoFundMe's for overseas tournaments are all the rage, aren't they, Clint?
Something like that. Wow.
Oh, this is amazing.
All right. Well,
Speaking of GoFundMe's, right? So I'll take that. Thank you for that segue.
That was really freaking smooth.
So we are running a GoFundMe for the Honest Wargamer to come back over and cover CanCon. Rob wants to not have to rely on this crowdfunding and that sort of stuff. But it's probably another couple of years away. But in the meantime, we've got a GoFundMe. It's the goal is about 2,500, which will bring Rob and a team member over, someone like Scrivo or Speckles or something like that. So if folks want to get Rob over here and give CanCon the world's best Warhammer coverage, then they should look at that GoFundMe. We've had some huge donations. Thank you very much. And I see there's a chap named Ken who's selling a Sylvaneth army, and he's pledged that every cent that he makes from selling that army, he's going to put into the GoFundMe as well. So if you're after some Sylvaneth, go buy Ken's because you're helping Rob get here as well. So.
and I met Ken at Brishammer, and he is an absolute legend, a very kind gentleman. So definitely go and grab those Sylvaneth off him. If you're looking to get into trees. Is that all the sales pitch, guys? You've sold pitched the ETC, you've sold pitched CanCon. Dwellers crowdfunding anything at the moment?
No, not at the moment. We'll wait. We'll let things calm down a bit before we try and take everyone's money.
Taking applications for Chris Cousins' role or anything else you want to sell?
Yeah, we'll try and fly him back here.
I'm sure he'd appreciate it. I think he's having a ball in England. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That is correct. That's correct. Yeah, he's living up in Scotland at the moment, which seems a pretty cool place to live.
Yeah, very good. All right, we should get into the topic now because I know you and Nick have a hard deadline, and I don't want to lose all that goodness that you have from the number of years that you have been in the scene and running events. Does that sound good, guys?
Sure.
I was about to imitate your voice. This is the Clint voice. Yes. Could have been a Liam voice. All right, let's move along. And the topic of the show, the reason why we have Clint and Nick here, is to talk about tournament organizing. I think it's something that I'm sure all of us have received countless Facebook private messages or comments or emails asking about how to run an event. Ryan Hooper, it's on the Facebook page. I think the Australian Buy and Sell. Look for Ken Sylvaneth, and you'll find the sale. All proceeds go to the Heralds of War and bringing over a great streamer. But tournament organizing. Wow, I almost stumbled over that. It's something that there's a lot of interest. I think, Nick, you called it out that we have a large scene. It's growing and growing and growing. Years ago, we had a couple of small events on the scene. The last, say, 18 months, it's really exploded. The Bendigo boys are putting on events. We've had the Runex team events coming up. Melbourne has been running either small events like CanCon. We've had events in Albury, Wodonga. Events like Sydney GT are now over 100 players. So, our scene is exploding, but there's more events happening than ever before. So I guess I wanted to really tap into the knowledge that you guys have about how do I run an event? How do I prepare to run that event? How do I gain those resources? And all of that great stuff. So I can either have the most amount of players, they have the greatest experience, and they come back for more. I think that's the important part. You put on a great event, people are going to come back, they're going to tell their friends, and this is how our scene just grows and grows and grows. Is that a fair statement to make, gentlemen, before we move forward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liam.
Oh, anytime. It's anytime.
So I might throw it over to Nick first, then I'll go to Clint, and maybe just, shout out your credentials. Tell us about some of the events, or, tell us a bit about your TO history, Nick.
Yeah, so TOing events for probably about 10 years now. Started with sort of 25, 30 player events that our local club was running back in probably early 7th, late 6th ed Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And probably peaked towards the end of 8th ed, running events with the Dwellers Below, which we've restarted doing with Lord of War, which we ran earlier this year. And that was my first Age of Sigmar event that I've run. But at the end of the day, most of the concepts and stuff are the same. It doesn't matter what game system you're running. So, yeah, I've probably run 7 or 8 events in total. Even helped run CanCon once back in the day. So I know where some of Clint's issues come from. Running events for quite a long time, and I just really, yeah.
And Clint, you've run an event or two, I hear. Is that correct?
Yeah, finally, you talk.
No, go Clint.
Liam's run all the events in Australia, so he's an authority in this space.
Apparently, I get banned, according to Horace. Go Clint.
Right. Can I talk now? Thank you. So I started running events during the tail end of 8th edition. Literally the weekend I ran my first 8th edition event with the leaks for Age of Sigmar. So it certainly cast an interesting mood across the whole event. So did that, then started running some Age of Sigmar events, and so ran some local stuff, and then nobody was running Age of Sigmar at CanCon, so I thought, right, let's do that. So we started with the sort of 45 players there, and then that's just grown year on year. I ran BrizCon the first year that it had Age of Sigmar in it, and then had to give that up to time commitments. But yeah, no, CanCon's really the thing that I run now and put most of my energy into, alongside the Masters. So
very cool. And we will have a show in the coming weeks to talk about the Masters and a little bit more at the Australian scene in regards to how all these events kind of come into play. Liam, you have run an event as well.
Yeah, I ran an event last year because Sydney had like a small little shortage of events, like competitively and stuff. So I decided to run a competitive event. And I think it was like when for Sydney, it was like quite a huge push to get events because everyone was doing 1 days and stuff. And yeah, so for like, how to describe it, it was an interesting experience. I got 24 players, which was at the time like maximum ranking points, which a lot of people back then were like fishing for. Like I know my gaming group were like, oh, if Liam gets this to 24, I don't like it saved them travel time, if that makes sense. Because the year before, there was about a group of 8 or 9 of us, I think it was. We were traveling up and down New South Wales and Queensland to compete in events. So I was like, cool, let me just run one. And that saves us all like $300 on flights. And so that's what I did. And then, yeah, it was good. I was thinking about running one this year, but life gets in the way. And also the calendar for events as we have in the TO group and stuff, that calendar filled up so quickly that you could not find a little slot.
Yeah.
Like you would have been clashing with like any events, and yeah, it was tough this year. But all the events this year that have been run smoothly from what I've seen, which is cool.
Liam, I was asking about your TO credentials, not all the excuses on not to run an event.
Shut up.
Cool. And Horace has actually made a really good comment. He's like, coach has packing boxes. And the answer is no, they're not packing boxes, the Gloom Spite, although I have moved away from them because the free people are back. But more importantly, it is terrain. All of that is terrain. All around me is terrain. It is mental. I have terrain literally here. My world is terrain right now. So my TO credentials at the moment, really, I started running my very first narrative event. So there was that Coalescence Malign Portents that came out, I think, 2 years ago, or might have been a year ago. Ran quite a large narrative event and kind of moved in and ran a teams event, a doubles event, run Sydney GT last year, which was just over 70 players, and now doing 110 Sydney GT this year. So while I've attended a lot of events, I think, Liam, you've hit the nail on the head, and potentially the next question, which is, why did we start getting into this? It was because we in Sydney didn't have a lot of local tournaments. We were traveling a lot. So I wanted to run an event for myself. So that's what got me into it. So maybe, Nick, what got you into running events?
The first event I ran, it was called Axemaster. It was my club would run it each year, and it basically got to the point where we were sort of rotating the TO each year, and I was like, you know what, it's probably my turn to run it and let someone else play. It got to the point where I'd sort of been playing long enough that I felt capable of running the event, and I just wanted to give it a try. So yeah, I just kind of put my hand up when it's my turn. It was an easy way to get into running events because it was a pre-existing event that the venue was already set, the timetable was pretty set, and it was all just kind of pick up where other people had left off. So yeah, that's how I initially got into events, was just picking up where some other TOs had left me.
And I think what's interesting, at least from my side of the fence, and Liam and Clint, you guys might agree, is that Melbourne for a while was very light on the events. I think Sydney and Brisbane or Queensland and New South Wales were really dominating the scene. Last year, we kind of saw the Bendigo boys really step up and start running events, but it wasn't Melbourne. They're just a little bit outside of Melbourne. But this year, we've really seen the ramping of CanCon. We're starting to see more and more events, whether it's at House of War. So it's been great to see you guys really take the bull by the horns and start running events to build that Melbourne scene, which I think has been really needed, which is awesome to you guys.
Yeah, it's been really good. It's been amazing Australia-wide, but particularly in Victoria in the last probably 12, 14 months, which has coincided with myself getting back into the hobby, is just seeing how the tournament scene has exploded throughout the country and in Victoria. And that scene, and as you said, like the Bendigo scene is amazing. They've got a 35-player, 40-player event coming up in a couple of weeks, and like 25 of the people are from Bendigo. So the amount of people playing in Bendigo and regionally in Victoria is amazing. And we just didn't have that kind of centralized Melbourne scene, but that's really picked up in the last, particularly in the last sort of 9 months or so, with a couple gaming clubs popping up. So it's been really good to see.
I'm also impressed that Toowoomba is running their first, the Toowoomba Open, which I believe is sold out at 50. So there's really been this explosion. But I know there's also events up, the Savage Northmen, and there's all these events, Doom and other South Australians, and I'm sure Tasmania will want to run an event. There's still opportunity, which I think is where I think today we'll talk a bit about, like, how do we go from good to great, but also how do I start the ball rolling in my local scene. So what makes a good event? Maybe like a broad open question for everyone to start with is like, what makes a good event, whether one that you've attended or one you've run? Clint, I might start with you. What makes a good Sigmar event?
I should have been prepared for this. What makes a good event? I know.
All right, I'll start with the chat, and that is probably Michael Tomo, who's come out and said beer.
Beer. Yeah, I don't know. None of the events I've run have had alcohol, so I don't think that's necessary. Look, It's not necessary.
Really?
It's
What
a
about
good-
that guy? What
Yeah,
about that
just say
guy at the second day of CanCon?
There's Death Strings at CanCon.
Yeah, righto. I think you'll find that an event that's well organized generally comes through to the players. Having sort of one person be the voice, and they're the contact point for everything, and they're the ones who do the talking and things like that, means that players have a good experience on the day by not having to run around and find people, and that kind of thing sort of flows downhill into sort of, if you're organized, you know what the scenarios are, they're out, people know what they're doing, people know what they're playing. That kind of has effects on the terrain. You don't want to be rocking up at a tournament and they're still like throwing terrain on their tables. That morning, I've been to some events like that. Yeah, I've rocked up to events and they've had to send somebody out to buy more MDF for the tabletops. So that's not great. So organization, I think, helps make a good event, because what that means is all that sort of stuff's taken care of, which lets the players just play their games. Yep. So, and that's why we go to events. We go to see people and play games. And if that's all you have to worry about as a player, then you're going to enjoy yourselves.
Nick, anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with that more. You can have all the sort of add-ons and fancy things and stuff that you want, but at the end of the day, if you do the simple stuff really well, you will have an event where everyone will have a great time, because everyone enjoys playing the game. So for the most part, if you're just facilitating that, you're going to make sure people have a great weekend. And the thing that turns people off events is when that lack of reliability and lack of organization impacts the players playing their games. So we're talking delayed round times, delayed finishing, because some people have to go to do stuff in the evening. And so if you've got an event that you've said you're going to finish by 6 p.m. and you're 45 minutes behind the schedule, that's going to ruin someone's last game because they're going to have to leave early. And that's what they'll remember. That's the negative stuff they'll remember. It's the redraws. It's the feel bad moments that they'll remember the most easy. So if you keep it simple, and for first time TOs, that's the big thing I always encourage, keep it simple and get the easy stuff right, because that will allow players to have a great weekend. And so if your organization's on point, even if you don't have the greatest prizes, even if you don't have, all these kind of bells and whistles that you can add on to an event, if you get that solid, easy stuff right, you'll have a great event and your players will have a great time and no one will complain, and they'll build on that and they'll come next year, and you get those foundations and then you can build on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think when I reflect on great events and the events that have been poor, it's always the little things. It's never how big the prize pool was, how many how many prizes were available or awards were available. It's the little things like, I'm not going to name and shame, but kitchens at the particular event, running behind schedule 30 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour, which are delaying times, which means the TOs rushed, or we're rushed, or some people are trying to eat their meal during the round. It's it's the little things that make a huge difference, and you got to remember, people are giving up their weekends to be with you. So it's imperative that setup, all of the work that you do before the event, really pays off on the weekend. The more you do before that, the easier it becomes.
I just wrote, Michael Thompson raised in the chat there, where the TO thinks of all players, not what's easiest for themselves, which I think is a good point to make, where the TO's running the event for the players. So yeah. And that comes through. Generally, you can generally tell when you've been to an event where that's the case.
Yeah.
Like, for me, as a guy who attends mainly events, I have to say, attending both Nick and Clint's events, I think the big thing that like me and my gaming group know that is a good event is generally, like, since most of us travel, is like how well it's run on time. And like, for example, Lords of War in June, like some of us had to fly out, and the fact that we got able to help them pack up and all this stuff, and it was like all run like on time, we knew it was like ran smoothly, and it was just that simple thing, and it made our trip less stressful, if that makes sense. And so like having a good like set time plan of like what time things should be done is probably like to me the most important, especially enough time that you get the best result in your games. If that makes sense.
I've been to a large event, again, not naming and shaming, but the kickoff for day 1 and day 2 was minimum 30 minutes late, which just had a huge knock-on effect to whether it's the lunch breaks, whether it's the scheduling, whether it's the time you get out. Maybe you've got stuff planned afternoon, or you've got a flight. They're all things that you're like, yeah, we'll push it back 30 minutes. People will just handle it. Actually, no, it actually does have some negative impacts sometimes.
I think I know which event you're talking about. I won't name it. But I think
I know what event he's talking about, and I'm just here going like, cool.
It's just the lessons that we learned. Like, things happen, we get it. But the better you can plan, the better the chances of you avoiding these mistakes are.
And timing's a really tough one, right? Because you basically, there's nowhere to get time back. If you've got a pretty tight schedule, you can't regain that time that you've lost. So you've got to be so harsh on it. And players will try and take your time, and they'll try and play their games a little bit longer. They'll start a turn when they probably shouldn't. And you've just got to be harsh as a TO. And it's tough when you're a new TO. You've got to be harsh. Just be like, nah, dice down. And if they protest, like, guys, you've had 2 hours 45, 2 hours 30 to play your game. You knew that ahead of time. I've been calling out the round time, saying you've got this long left. You've got to put your dice down. And like Clint obviously had some issues at CanCon on day 1 with the with players not returning their rules packs, and that put a pretty big delay on the rounds.
Delay on.
Yeah, and you've just got to go after those players, and like Clint would have been absolutely fuming, I can only imagine, at those players, because those players that do the wrong thing push a whole event back, and so you've just got to be right on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe let's talk about going to the start. So how do we first build out that great event? So let's imagine I've never run an event before. I've got these aspirations of running an event, whether we just don't have enough, or maybe we have a fledgling and growing community that this would be great. Where do I start? Whether it's location, whether it's players pack, whether it's the terrain, like what advice would you give me starting off as a TO, Clint?
It depends whether you've been, like, if you've been to events before, maybe you've traveled and you want to bring that back to your local group. Basically, taking what you liked from those events, and that's where you're going to start your starting point from. If you've got a local gaming store, getting in with them and saying, perhaps you've got 10 tables, 5 tables, 8 tables, whatever. Can we take over this over the store on Sunday? We'll run a little event, and just starting small. But if you can get in with a local store or a local gaming club and help utilize their resources, that's always a great starting point. And then as far as like players packs and things like that go, I think if it's your first event, just something simple. Just, this is how many points. This is what we're going to play that day. We're going to play for 2.5 hours a round or whatever. I don't think people really, if you're running a little store event or it's your first event and you're pretty upfront about that, people are going to be happy with these. These are the battle plans we're playing. This is the time. It's going to cost you $20 and we'll give you pizza for lunch. That's as much as a players pack has to be for your little one day, a first event that you're going to run. And then as you get experience and you decide you want to try new things, or you're starting to get people, 20 odd people say, "Oh, I want to play at your event." Well, you can go, "Well, okay, maybe I can find a bigger space," or that kind of thing. So,
Nick, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, expectation management for me is pretty big. So if you set the expectation to your players that it's going to be this grand, super well run, amazing event, and it's your first event, okay, that's your prerogative, but potentially people will come away disappointed. Whereas if you just start small, start with a one day, like Clint says, in your local shop or in a community hall or something like that. And you just say, hey, this is our first go. We're trying to build the scene. We're keeping it simple. We've got our battle plans. We're here to have fun, play games. It's not necessarily the most competitive event. We're not trying to get max rankings points or anything like that. You set that expectation. It's a casual weekend of fun games. People will come away from it going, hey, we had a casual weekend of fun games. You set the expectation saying this is going to be the best tournament in the world and it's a first time event. It's probably not going to happen. So yeah, set that expectation for yourself first. Run what you want to run, but set that expectation for yourself on how it's going to go, and then set that expectation for the players. And you can do that really easily. It's something we did for Lord of War with a bit of a mission statement at the start of your player pack. Just a couple words. Here's what I'm trying to achieve this weekend. This is what I want the players to experience. And that way, if someone wants to go to a hyper-competitive event that's run amazingly and all the scenarios are as balanced as possible and stuff, and they see that and they go, okay, that's not what I want to do. I want something super serious. Those players who might not have a good time won't go to your event, and the players who will have a good time will. So,
Liam, anything else you'd add?
No, I think they've pretty much nailed it on the head. Just start small and then grow big. And for me, I think probably even starting at your local store, as Clint said, is probably the best way to get started, and just keep it super simple. That's pretty much it, really. I've seen, we've kind of seen it in a way with GamesCube. I think it was last year where we just started doing 1 dayers, and then out of nowhere we did a 2-dayer, which was actually quite a big success for a Sydney community. And just seeing that grow and grow and grow, and then went big, and then that there's a perfect example. But yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is knowing and I like to look at tournament organizing like a project. I do a lot of project planning. I've shared stuff with Clint in the past, just in regards to looking at what not biting off more than you can chew. I think about, if I'm going to run an event, I need tables, I need terrain, I need resources. Where do I get those resources? Whether I'm going to build them, and do I have time to build them? Can I borrow them? And can I get them before I tell the world that I'm going to have a 50-player event, but then I realized weeks out that, or maybe even days out, that I don't have those mats or terrain. People rock up and have a bad time. So, don't bite off more than you can chew. And I think, Nick, 100% correct. It's setting the expectation for your players and yourself. Yes, it's easy to accept every man and his dog. But having a limit to say, look, the first 12 players, this is going to be a 12-player event. That's it for now. Next event, and I think Brisham's done that really well, where they've gone, right, small event, grown, and then they just, as they're building their resources and then their experience, they're also growing. And more people are they're missing out. So next time the tickets come up, they're grabbing them.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do you guys build a players pack? Is it as simple as Clint just said, just a schedule? And how do I even know what type of schedule I put together? Time for rounds, lunches, what are the considerations?
In this grand age of the internet, you can find any number of players packs out there that are published, that have all those sort of details in them for those events, and you can go, okay, well, this is the bit that I like, or this is the bit that I don't like. And realistically, let's face it, everybody's first players pack is probably pilfered from someone else's, or parts thereof. Or my first players pack for my 8th edition events were, based on what Queensland Northern Knights were doing in Caboolture, because I'd been to their events and I'd really enjoyed them. And Jacob, who was running the fantasy events there, had a really good, clear pack. And I'm like, cool. I talked to him. I said, do you mind if I just borrow some elements of this? He's like, no, that's cool. And so that formed the foundation of my first players pack, and then that's evolved. There's still wording in the current CanCon pack from that first players pack. Finding finding lots of examples, figuring out what it is that you like, putting your own spin on it. Let's face it, you don't have to put your own spin on it. You can just say, we're going to run this one day out. We're going to use this pack.
Why reinvent the wheel? Like, exactly. If people are already doing a good job, why recreate this whole pack that's maybe unfamiliar to players too?
Yeah. So,
like, why fix something that doesn't need to be fixed in a way? If that makes sense.
Exactly. It's like, our store thing, we're just going to, this is just a copy of the Games Cube pack or whatever, and we're just going to run with that. And because that will give you some idea on times, or, expected round times, and on what people expect for lunch and all that sort of stuff. So,
and you'll see in the lead up to big events, particularly CanCon, I suspect, you'll see what they call warm-up events, and that's a great chance for smaller, newer TOs. Run a warm-up event for a bigger event, and you literally steal their pack. You make it a one-day version of the pack. You sort of steal half their timetable, and you go, hey, come to this event, local players, warm up for CanCon. We'll play the CanCon pack. You can get to use it. You can test your army list. We'll do it a week before this submission, and you'll see that. But you're going back to what Clint said about copying things from different packs. Like, some of the questions, or some of the phrasing that I see in player packs now, I remember like Chris Cousins writing for one of his events in like 2005. Like, that's how long people have just been sort of grabbing bits and bobs from different events. And occasionally I'll see that one particular phrase that he used. I'm like, I remember that when he first wrote it. So it's amazing. And like, we did that for the Lord of War pack. We just shamelessly went, hey, I like the way CanCon does that. Hey, I like the way, X event does this. You'll see in a lot of packs the South Coast GT cylindrical line of sight system, and people are literally using the same photo of the same model, and they're just copying it and pasting it. And but realistically, that's the best way to do it. Write the pack that you want to play, or that sets the tone for the event that you want. But you don't have to write it all from scratch. You can kind of borrow it from all different places.
Well, it's a circle of life, to be honest. Like, so last year at Sydney GT, I stole Dave from NashCon, Dave Griffiths, the way he does the objectives, the secondary objectives, which he had like a deck of 19 cards, which I thought was a really interesting way to randomly generate them. I know, Clint, we've had a few laughs occasionally because the way you word the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get around the Magma Dragon, not being a high elf dragon. We've seen them in other people's packs and had a little laugh.
It's a Vargul for Son of Mongol, and don't use a High Elf Dragon as a Magma Dragon. That has shown up in packs. I was reading a pack from Northern Ireland that has that exact sentence in it. So it gets around.
But then saying that, Bobo last year stole Sydney GT the way I did the Realms, and they even stole my cheat sheet in regards to each round and each of the spell and the command ability and the Realmscape feature. And that was an event 2 times the size of my event. So there is a circle, and we're all kind of stealing the best of the best. And I know Joel McGrath, who's in the chat at the moment, I stole the way he does the spells, so people can sacrifice their spell lore to get access to one of the spells from the Mortal Realms, from Malign Portents, Malign Sorcery. But again, like, there's good ideas coming around, so exposing yourself to packs or even seeing the way people do things. It's like, just borrow it and make a mongrel of your own pack, the event that you want to run.
Yep.
Sorry, go on, Clint.
I read packs for events that I have no intention of going to. I was reading a pack from Northern Ireland. Why? Because I wanted to see how they were doing things. Get a
GoFundMe going.
Quite. So, I want to see what they're doing, because they might have some really good ideas, or different communities do different things, do things in different ways. And you might look at it and go, oh, why have we never tried it this way? Or I wonder why they do it that way. So you'll hit up the TO and they say, oh, we run stuff this way because this is what our communities tend to do. So,
yeah. And similar to what Tyson has just actually said in the chat, is if you're a new TO and you're running an event, The biggest mistake you can probably make with your player pack is trying to do a little bit too much with it and trying to do your own thing too early, because, and you do see it with smaller events or newer events. You look at the player pack and you read it, and often it's like independent stores that don't have a strong kind of Warhammer scene, and they don't sort of see games played there that often, and they'll write their own scenarios, or they'll do something just wacky, and you kind of look at it as a player and go, you know what, that's just not going to work, and it will just turn off players. So if you keep it simple, you copy the established events, and chuck a little twist in there. It can be anything, but keep the core. It's similar to what I said before. Keep it simple. Keep the game on the table pretty similar how people normally play it, and people will have fun. Whereas if you write your own scenarios and someone turns up and they literally can't win a scenario, they're going to feel bad. They're going to vent about that on the internet, and no one really likes it.
Yeah. And I mean, Chris Welfare of the Mortally Wounded, they run Sydney Slaughter, which is a custom narrative event. But Chris releases those scenarios months in advance. Yeah. Now, some people don't like... So go on.
Yeah, and Chris is a very good player, and he knows what he's talking about, and he's run events and stuff like that. So when you get to that point, you can sort of start doing that kind of thing and throw your own little twist into it. But yeah, particularly when you're new.
Yeah. And look, you get to the likes of Liam to test it as well. So if you are going to write your own scenarios or your own things, test them before you send them out to the wild.
Well, he learned quite quickly that there was sometimes some of the scenarios that he did write, they needed to be practiced. Because there was like one scenario, like not this year, but the year before, where like you could be smashing your opponent by holding all the ejectors, but you could be losing on a particular roll of the dice. And he was like, oh, I should have. And he learned from that, and he did that. And then this year, I'm pretty sure we practiced his scenario for all his scenarios for 2 months, and everything was run smoothly. But yeah, like for me, the player pack doesn't actually have to be pretty as well. Like I do know, Anthony, yours, and same with all your play packs, actually all of you, they're really pretty to look at, but I've seen some player packs where they're Word document and it just has all the information on it. So I think the most important thing for a player pack is to make everything clear. If that makes sense.
Look,
especially for newbies.
Go check out Joel McGrath, the Bush Bash, I think is the one that's coming up soon. I think it's a 2-page player pack. It's clean, lots of detail. Then you look at the likes of CanCon or even my event, and it's 10 to 12 pages because I want to be very thorough. So there's lots of different examples, and obviously find something in between for your scene. I might pull up this question from the chat in regards to Super Keen has asked about soft scores and thoughts on building soft scores into your packs, or potentially at least some considerations if you would put a soft score in. Now, I'm not saying if it's good or not, but if you are, what's the decision and why?
Hey, Nick, is this bringing back Twitter memories?
Oh, man. Everyone has different kind of opinions on how things are run, and mine's probably different to Clint's. So let's see what Clint's is.
Bear it back. I'm going to get popcorn.
First off, what is a soft score for anyone who isn't familiar with this term?
So a soft score is basically anything that's a score that's not in any way related to gaming. So it might be points for painting. It might be points for sportsmanship or gaming etiquette or things like that, to simple things such as getting your list on time. And they're used to reward players for certain things that TOs want to accomplish with their events, essentially. But the painting, generally, if you have some sort of painting rubric to encourage people to bring painted armies to the event, and you use that kind of to enforce a certain painting standard. You want your armies to look good, so you reward points in that way. Sports scores, while a hugely controversial topic, depending on who you talk to, they can be used to enforce a certain standard of player behavior by rewarding good behavior with points that in the end will determine where you sit on the ladder.
So a couple of examples of that could be, did your opponent arrive to the table on time? Did they were they clear with their rules? Things like this, that, and I've heard stories in the past where, a player constantly goes to the bar all the time. So really that 2.5 hours you may have allocated might only be an hour and a half. So that might be a behavior you're trying to reward or disincentivize. Clint, go on. So I just wanted to clear that up if anyone isn't familiar with that term.
Just elaborate on the points. Yeah. So coming back to Reese's question, where is it? Sorry.
I can bring that back up. He's just asking about are we seeing them?
I don't think they're going away. I think they're just being perhaps scored in different ways. Like, I don't think anyone has said, I'm not going to do a painting rubric in my decent size event. They're certainly not going away. Capped paint rubrics are probably the norm now, and they have been for a little while. I think what Reese is probably referring to is the way that sports or etiquette now is being tracked. So once upon a time, they were points that often contributed to your end score, whereas now we're sort of shifting away to, we're still tracking people's etiquette, but they don't turn into points at the end of the event. And so it's going to be, the TOs have an accurate gauge of how people are acting in their games, but there's no opportunities for people to carry hard feelings over into people's scores, which, while I don't believe it's happened in Australian events, there's some famous cases overseas with, brothers knocking each other, sports scores and things like that. That's a bit of a ultimate.
Oh, that's my favorite story.
That's why Nick is laughing, but we won't go into that. But yeah, no, I think there's an evolution in how they're doing it. I don't think they're going away. I suppose the scoring aspect is going away, but we're still tracking all those important things.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough, right? Like, I know a question that's always kind of contended is in contention. Sorry, is did you have a good time, or is this someone that you'd like to play again? I've seen that in packs in the past, and it's quite hard for some people to separate: is this person a jerk, or are they just playing a super hard list like Daughters of Cain? And some people, rating their experiences really poorly because you've played as Slaanesh and you fought last. Now, was that the player's fault? No, not really. It's a rule. It's a part of the game. So it's separating the two. But and again, that in itself causes some confusion and often some potentially bad tastes on both sides. Nick, you've got something to say about this?
Yeah. So I've seen in the past sort of 12 months a similar shift to what we had towards the end of 8th edition or during 8th edition. And I apologize for always going, back in 8th edition. But it's that shift away from including the scoring. And so you started off, some of the sports scores were more subjective. You had those questions. Did you enjoy your game? Would you play your opponent again? And I find those very awkward for the reasons you just mentioned, but even just for, like, I myself, when I first started playing events sort of 12, 13 years ago, I was a very introverted person. I didn't speak much. Like, looking at where I'm now and on a podcast and on shows like this and stuff, I would have never thought that would happen. I was very introverted. And so I wouldn't have a bad game with someone, but you definitely weren't going to be giving me a best sports vote or something like that. And potentially you would get knocked for that. Did you have a great game with that opponent or something like that? So you see this shift away from that subjectivity, and that's really good because I don't like that sort of subjectivity in it. If you're doing the right things in your game, you shouldn't get docked any points for it. And, you'd have events where you just rate your opponent out of 5, and it had the simple issue where some people would just give 5 saying, I'm not going to hit my opponent on sports unless they did something wrong. And some would go, well, 4 out of 5 is a great game. So, and some people would get 5s for medium games and 4s for, great games and stuff like that. So moving away from that subjectivity is important as far as I'm concerned. And that's where there was a little bit of controversy and stuff a while back with some arguments on the internet, but, everyone moves on from those. And the way I personally like to run sports at my events and taking away painting, because painting, I think, it's pretty established how it's done with these kind of capped systems, which I'm a big fan of. The way I like to do sports at my events is as Clint said, track the behavior. So ask your players, is my opponent measuring correctly? Are they on time? All that kind of stuff. But don't add it to their scores. If there's a discrepancy, if someone's saying, hey, I don't think my opponent was being clear, or I don't think my opponent was measuring correctly, that's just a flag for you as a TO to go, okay, this is someone I need to keep an eye on. And so when you're roaming through the tables as a TO in the next round, you keep an eye on that player, and then you can kind of correct behavior before it becomes a big issue. And it also avoids situations where two players play a bad game against each other. They have some arguments about stuff, and they look through that list for every little thing they can mark their opponent down on. And suddenly you've kind of lost a bit of control as the TO, because they've gone, you know what, I'm going to nuke his score. And they won't even read it. They'll just go 0 out of 5 for sports, bang, hand it into the TO. And that's not what you want, right? Like, that's not what you want them to do. And so if you've got that, if they do that, you'll still see that as a TO. And then you've got things that you can correct as a TO and things you can watch. And if a player, I think, is, pushing the edge a bit, I'll go over and I'll tell them, mate, I'm going to deduct your points. Or if I see this again, I'll just straight out kick you out. Because for me, if I think you're intentionally cheating an event, if I genuinely think someone's intentionally cheating an event, there's no sports deduction. It's just you're out. If there's something unintentional behavior that needs addressing, generally I find talking to the person and saying, hey, this is what I've observed. This is what I think needs to change. So being a bit more proactive than just letting them lose some sports points and at the end of the event go, oh, I lost some sport points. Oh, well.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good point, and potentially a nice lead in as well in regards to being present as a TO, being available and not sitting behind a desk. And that often means that you may need a helper or helpers on the day. So I guess for me, it's about mitigating that. So if someone's having a bad game, nipping that on the butt and kind of sorting that out on the spot, as opposed to waiting for that sports score to come in. So how many helpers should you get, or how should you be present during the weekend? Any tips or any advice or any things that you've seen that's worked really well? Nick, I might ask you first.
It comes down to your pre-event organisation. If you're well organised and you don't have to do everything in between while the games are being played, you'll have time to just roam the tables, and you'll have a better time as a TO because you get to go talk to people. You get to watch the awesome games being played, watch people having fun, and you can just have a bit of bants, have some interactions with people. We can heckle a little bit, but it means you're available. And if you do a lap of the room every hour or so, even so, that's only twice around. People will see that you're there. They'll know that you're available. And then if they've got an issue, they'll raise it with you. And just, again, encourage that at the start. Get up, say at the start of your event, hey, I'm judging this event. I'm running the event. If you have an issue with your opponent, rather than you guys getting an argument, just call me over. If you're measuring something and you don't know if it's 7.9 or 8.1 inches, call me over. I'll measure it. I'll make a ruling. And if you, as a player, and I really encourage people as players to call a TO over if something is even slightly contentious, because it's not a bad thing to call over a TO. And somewhere I think there's a little bit of a stigma that's come in about calling a TO over 2 games. But call your TO over, get them to resolve it before it's even a problem. If I even think my opponent might have a slight issue with a measurement or something, I'll get the TO over just to confirm it. Or if I'm not sure about a rule interaction, double check it with a TO. Your opponent sees that you're doing the right thing, trying to make sure everything's clear. And the game goes on. It's generally quicker than sorting through your rule book and measuring it a billion times. But yeah, and as a TO, you kind of proactively can manage things. Also, if you're an experienced TO who's played been to a lot of events and in the scene, you kind of know the players. Like, everyone knows the players that you got to watch out for at events. Just keep an eye on them. If you're doing random tables, you can put them on the tables near where you're sitting. If you know someone's going to be a problem, you put them nearby, you keep an eye on their tables, and you kind of head things off before they start.
Yeah, no, well said. And Clint, you are a man that has lots of resources and helpers. For all of the events you've run, whether it's a one day or obviously as large as CanCon, when you hire a helper or you get a helper, how many do you want? What are the jobs that you're asking them to do? Like, what's some of those considerations if I'm running an event?
How many? Probably yourself plus 1 for every 50 players, I guess, if you're just running the event. So when CanCon was 105 players or whatever it was Dennis and myself. and we could have definitely used the one extra set of hands. So that would be myself and 2 for the 2 lots of 50, and that would have kind of worked out really well. And then at CanCon this year, when we went to the 200, I think I had like 5 or something like that. I had a ridiculous amount, and then there was probably one person who wasn't doing something all the time. Did you just count for me, Liam? Thank you. So I think, 1 for every 50 players plus yourself is probably good. And they can be doing things like running around doing your time calls, which is really important, letting people know how long they've got, making rules calls. Like if you've got, so we had in the CanCon team this year, we had some people who weren't great with rules, like they don't play much or whatever. They were definitely just there as a set of hands. If they got asked rules questions, they'd come and find one of the other people. But if they're capable, they can do rules questions. They can help you mark painting. They help you set stuff up. They go and collect and pass out scorebooks or whatever if you're running the score sheet sort of thing.
Your data entry potential.
Data entry is a big one. It's less of an issue now, I think, with everyone sort of moving away from manual scoring. I've finally seen the light, and CanCon won't be using manual scoring next year. There's finally systems that do what I want, right? I looked for 2019 and it just wasn't available. So that you can have people do a whole range of jobs, and I think something that I've learned is that you have to tell people what their job is, and you have to make sure that they can do it. So we had some paint scoring at CanCon that probably wasn't right, but that's just from, and I'll own that, that's just from me not being super clear with every single person who was running around painting exactly what the different levels were. So that's on me. Training your offsiders is a huge thing. And that's something every year with CanCon, I learn new things. And so eventually it'll just be perfect, right? Or not.
Yeah.
I'll
and
find something else to stuff up. So,
and we're always learning, and we're always taking on feedback. I certainly learned a big lesson from Sydney GT last year, where I tried to rely on a system 100%, and it failed me at the time. And I ended up having to go down, and Nick kind of talked about sports score being between 1 to 5. And unfortunately, that was the route I had to go because I didn't have my system up and running on the day. So I've learned about I've learned that I need a manual backup in case of emergency, whether it's a printed sports score or a printed scoring that I can do with Excel, or just having a plan B. But it's alluded to a question that Tristan Gray has asked around, will CanCon be using tabletop TO? Now, I'll let Clint answer that. But before we go there, we have alluded to systems. Now, there are plenty of systems out there to help you run events, whether it's down under pairings, whether it's tabletop TO, best coast pairings. There is probably lots of other systems that people are using. Now, I've taken the lead from Nick, who ran Down Under Pairings, an Australian-based system that I know you guys had a great experience. A lot of the players were saying how good and how much they enjoyed the overall usage of the system during the day. Liam, you're putting your hand up like, yeah, this was great. So I've moved over to it for Sydney GT. I don't know, Clint, do you want to make any announcements, or is it still secret on what you're doing?
No, we're looking to use Down Under Pairings. After Lord of War, Nick and I had a big long chat about what it couldn't do, and how it would, whether it would suit CanCon, and I was super impressed with that chat, and so that's the route we're going. So
there are plenty of great systems out there that'll help you do matchups, do grudges, to do things like, I know even in tabletop TO you can do your painting score. So just know that there are digital ways to do the things that you want to do. So do use your Google Foo to find out tournament systems, and most of them are free or very, very, very cheap. Very cheap.
Yep.
Speaking of cheap, what's the considerations on pricing? Like, how do you guys set your pricing structures? Clint, I'll go to you. You're an experienced man.
Yeah, Clint doesn't get to set it, does he?
Yeah, that's an interesting question to ask. CanCon sort of dictate how that works. Basically, there's a fixed fee for people to attend to basically pay for the venue, and then I specify a prize pool on top. So I kind of figure out vaguely how much I'd like to spend on prizes, and then that gets added onto the fee. So it's sort of, I think it's about $15 a person or something like that for CanCon. So that goes into a fairly decent pool, and we split it out as much as we can. When I was running independent events, you just had to make sure. So basically, before you set your price, you've got to take into account your venue. What's your venue hire for the weekend? The table hire, any terrain that you might borrow, or be, giving somebody fuel money to drive terrain from Brisbane to Toowoomba for you, or something like that. Like, all that sort of counts. Are you putting food on? When I used to run events in a hall, the same hall where Toowoomba Open's going to be now, when we used to run events in that hall, we'd do lunch. We'd put lunch on for people, and we'd do breakfast on the Sunday. So you factor that into your costings as well. How far are you going with trophies? What's a rough idea there? And then, a little bit of splash money for door prizes and things like that. And then you'd sort of divide that by a reasonable expectations of your players. So if you were running a 50-player event, but you've never run an event before, don't count on getting 50 people. If you count on getting half that, and then you do hit 50 people, then you've got all that extra money to buy bigger trophies or better food or more door prizes or whatever. But being realistic in your budget, I think, is super important when setting your prices. Making sure you cover all the things. I know the first time I ran an event, I didn't factor in making terrain. Like, I figured that that's an investment. And I think it was about 3 years before I paid for all the terrain I made from running events, from running independent events. So, but yeah, that's as far as independent non-CanCon events go.
And Nick, yourself, anything from your experience?
Yeah, like the first thing I look at, and it's generally the biggest cost, is that venue cost. And that's where, like, you've got to kind of work out, because that's the thing that you've got to generally pay beforehand, and it doesn't change depending on how many players. And that's it's generally the biggest cost. So, like, TOing's a lot of work, and we've all done it. We've all put so many hours into events, and you don't want to put so many hours in it because you're not getting paid for your hours, right? But you don't want to put that many hours in and then lose money. Like, that's just an absolute kick in the teeth. So, like, set that budget and figure out how much that venue is, which is your biggest thing, and figure out those minimum things you're going to have to buy, and work out what you can charge so that a reliable amount of people, you can generally figure out how many you're going to get. And like Clint said, if you're saying a 50-player event, but it's your first time, aim for 25, start small or gradually build it, and set your price somewhere so that you can pay that venue off with half the amount of people that you're hoping for. And that way you're not going to lose money, because nothing feels worse than not only have people not turned up to your event as many as you hoped, and you've put all this time and effort into it, but suddenly you're $500 in the hole because you didn't budget right for your venue. And that's like, no one wants to be losing money on this hobby. Like, we all drop enough money into it as it is, right? So as far as pricing goes, tournament prices have generally been pretty stable. I remember they used to be you used to be able to factor in $20 to $25 per day. So a 2-day event was generally around $50. That's been creeping up. Some events, the Bendigo guys run really lower cost events. They've got a great deal with their venue, which is awesome. It means you can play a 2-day event for $30 or whatever they charge, which is sweet. And then there's, like, with World of War, we tried to do a more premium event. So what we did is we went, I think we charged $65 for the event. And we went, we're going to charge a bit more than your average event. Average events between 50, 60 for a 2-dayer. We're going to charge 65 and potentially we'll push that up a little bit next year. I wouldn't go much higher than 70, but we'll push it up a bit higher, and we want people to, feel that the extra inclusion. So we put on lunch, $65, got your lunch both days, got you some tokens, got you a venue with a bar in it and stuff like that. So we went, you know what, we're going to be a bit more expensive. And like the Moonstruck event we ran that at the Ibis Hotel in Melbourne in the CBD. Like this was in a corporate like hotel venue for conferences, and we were charging $85-$90 a head, but you got 2 really good meals, like really big solid meals in the kitchen downstairs, and it's CBD venue, stuff like that. So you can charge more as long as, again, you set that expectation. If you set the expectation to players that it's going to be a premium event and they're going to get premium, weekend out of it, you can charge that premium price. If you set the expectation that it's going to be, the cheap, not cheap and nasty, but a very simplified event, but then you're charging $80 a head, again, players will be unhappy.
I would add, just work out your cost before you work out your pricing. So think about those things that, I know when I did my Sydney GT and I've moved to a large event, like I've got one of the largest leagues clubs in Australia, or at least in Sydney. It's a premium event, and it's a beautiful event, but it's cost money. So I knew that I needed to get X amount of bums on seats. I knew that, I needed a certain amount of trophies, but before I went and got trophies, I thought about, well, at a certain amount of players, maybe let's say it's top 30 or top 40 players, I would only get certificates. I'd print off some nice certificates at Officeworks, and then anything more than say 30 or 40 people, that allows me to get trophies. And the more players I'm getting, the more funds that I have, which means I can invest those dollars in other places, so I can make more trophies or more prize support or whatever it might be. So some things to consider as well is exactly what Nick said. Don't go in the whole $500 to $1,000, because I've seen TOs fall into those traps in the past. It feels bad for them. It feels bad for us when I hear that a TO's lost money putting on an event for me. But at the same time, part of that's the budgeting and also the expectation setting. So just, it's a fine line, and look what other people are doing, and see where you can pull your resources as well. I know Chris Welfare, for example, is lending me 5 battle mats. Travis is lending me 40 tables that I can use at Sydney GT. So I don't have to buy everything up front. Ask people around, whether it's those games clubs, whether it's the players, or even TOs like me. Maybe I can lend them to you, or for a small fee that I can reinvest in my own terrain. So take advantage of the other people around you.
What I was going to say was, since we did say if you're starting out TOing and stuff, is to start at a store, like your ticket price would generally probably be like whatever a 1-day event or 2-day event would be at the stores, which kind of saves you, like, I mean, that just saves you like understanding like the budget. You go, cool, this is how much it's going to be and stuff there. Because like all that kind of stuff, when you're starting out small, just work it out. But that comes to our next question, is like, with prizes, like where do you allocate for prizes? If that makes sense. Like where, like, is it like mainly, like, do you guys mainly put stuff in for like the hobby side or like the gaming side, or like what is the general plan on prizes or ideas for prizes? Like this year we've seen a sword, CanCon we saw a hammer, and then I'm pretty sure we saw a flask at Lords of War. So like what do you guys do for prizes and stuff when it comes to TOing? Clint?
I think it's important to reward like the different aspects fairly equally. I think having all of your prizes in, say, gaming, and then so gaming, you get a trophy and a KR case and $100 and these beautiful bikini girls, and you won best painted, and you get this paintbrush and a $20 voucher for somewhere. Like that's going to, it's going to, I suppose, create a bit of bad feeling in people who are there for the hobby. They feel that perhaps their hard work isn't being rewarded, I guess, and things like that. So I try and make sure that, like, when I'm doing my CanCon prizes, I'll have all of the positions that I'm rewarding. So your best overalls, your best opponents, best alliance, your hobby awards, and they're all getting a trophy and what that trophy's worth, and are they getting vouchers or other prizes that people have donated, or that kind of thing, and just making sure of the values of that, because it might seem that, okay, well, it first gets this and this and this because they won, and all of a sudden you're giving, $300 worth of stuff to this guy and $30 worth of stuff to the guy who comes second. And kind of just making sure, like, not everything has to be ruled by monetary value, but it just kind of seeing that reinforces where you how your prize divvying out is, and also making sure that it's not just the people who win that get stuff. So previously, like, wooden spoon's a big deal and that sort of thing. Like, everybody sort of rewards wooden spoon and things like that. And I think for the first couple of CanCons, I did wooden spoon, and then second wooden spoon, like the player who wasn't quite bad enough to get wooden spoon, or the whole top 10 at CanCon get something. So if you came fourth, you still get a voucher and stuff like that. So and then the narrative prizes this year at CanCon were to help spread out those prizes amongst the other players as well, to give people something else that people can try for, and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get something from an event.
Before I throw it over to Nick for his idea, I just want to call out as well, something that I consciously made a decision last year to do was to make sure that my worst terrain wasn't on the bottom tables as well, because nothing sucks than being on the bottom tables. And yes, it's good to allocate additional prizes to wooden spoon, but also put them on a good table, give them some good terrain, and help them have a fun time after they've probably been smashed once, twice, 3 times, and that's why they're at the bottom. So that's a consideration that I would call out if you're not already doing.
And some of the best painters are the worst players. So some of the best looking armies are going to be down the bottom of the event. So why wouldn't you have the nice terrain down there? Because then you can take pretty photos, right?
Yeah.
At first CanCon, we were on a corner, so I made sure all the good armies, all the nice armies, were around the outside where people walked. So as they walked past, they got to see all the really nice armies.
Is that why I was in the corner? Far out.
So people kind of got to see the nice stuff as they walked past. Why would you not try and market the game that way?
Yeah.
So
put the best looking players on the edge.
Sometimes it's both.
Shout out to my boy Danny Carroll. Yeah, so for Lord of War, we were really lucky. We had some really good sponsors supporting the event, and they gave us the ability to, and something we really wanted to focus on was sharing the love. So from a budgetary perspective with the prizes, my first focus is trophies, and I'll happily spend more on trophies than I will on prizes. Because at the end of the day, we all spend a lot of our disposable income on toys, and so getting $100 voucher, it's cool, but at the end of the day, you look at how much we spend on the hobby some years. $100 vouchers drop in the pool, right? Drop in the ocean. Yeah. So cool trophies, things you can take away and put on your shelf and go, hey, cool, I went well at that event. It's a memento that reminds you of the good time you had at that weekend, which a unit of dudes that you paint up maybe won't. So the first thing for me is trophies, and people like prizes as well. And when you've got the budget, it's good to do both. But yeah, for me, we did trophies and we did prizes, and we tried to really spread the love with the prizes. Tyson's just mentioned top-heavy prize structures don't work in AOS, and that's something we tried to step away from a little bit. If you're winning the event, you're probably already having a great time. You don't need to go home with a crazy amount of stuff. We had the budget to do a decent amount of stuff, but what we also got to do was just spot prizes. And we had funny prizes for like most medium player, which was the player that ranked dead in the middle and, last place. But we also had, we had 8 trophies, I think, 9 trophies for 9 little medals for anyone who got a painting nomination. We had medals for anyone who got a judge's painting nomination. So we got to do that. We got to do extra sports prizes, things like the most sporting team. So the South Australian guys won that as a group, which is cool. But then we just sent Nick Gentili around with a bunch of product, and he would randomly rock up at tables and be like, play rock, paper, scissors for this general's handbook. Play rock, paper, scissors between the two of you for some contrast paints or some paints or some brushes or something. So and that we kind of focused on those lower end tables where people potentially weren't picking up the prizes that they at near the top. And so it just spreads the love, and it makes everyone feel included, and everyone walks away with a little bit of something.
Yeah, something that I did last year that seemed to be really popular that I'm bringing back, and I know Doom and Darkness stole it for Saggy T, was I did something each round. I had what was called a negative achievement, where the first person, like let's say round one, the first 3 people to fail a 3-inch charge could come up to me at the TO desk and take a prize away. Then the next one might be trying to cast a spell with a double 1. If they failed with a double 1, they walk away with the prize. Very similar vein to Nick. If someone's having a bad time and that roll just doesn't go their way, it's a nice way to spread the love. And I think if I think of an event who spreads the love the most, I've got to give credit to the Bruce Hammer boys, who you walk away with a set of 5 Bruce Hammer dice, you walk away with a sticker, you walk away with a combat gauge, you walk away with a nice little swag kit. Clint, I know you do it. Nick, I know you do it. A lot of events do it, but certainly making sure everyone walks away with something. And these accessories don't have to cost a lot. Whether they're 3D printed, like what I'm supporting a Warcry event with coming up soon, whether they're acrylic, whether, they don't have to be expensive, but spreading the love is important, and not just going top heavy, as Tyson's already pointed out.
Yeah, if you've got 50 players and you're charging everyone $50-$60 to play, you can find $1 or $2 each. It's $100 out of your budget to give everyone just a combat gauge, one of the 3-inch gauges, because everyone collects those and from different events and stuff. They're not expensive. They're little acrylic things, like heaps of places will do them up for you, and it just gives everyone something to take home, no matter where they finish. No matter what happens, they get to take something home, and that's a good feeling for players.
Nick, question from Tristan Gray, and he said, for a smaller tournament, let's say it's an 8 to 12 player tournament, what do you think the most important thing you'd want to offer them?
Tough one. What's the most important thing? I'm trying to think what the budget would be. Like just a small prize, like a certificate. Most important thing is just run a good event where everyone walks away having a good time, because your budget probably won't cover much with that many players, and that's where you want to run it in a store, because a lot of stores will go, and like Good Games in Melbourne are really great with us. They go, we're going to charge everyone $20, $25 a head, but you know what? We'll give you that back in store credit for prize support. So you don't have to worry about prize support. Then you print off some certificates, you give everyone some certificates, they get a little gift card. You can't lose money on the event because they're just charging you per player, and you get a little bit of prize support. And a lot of stores will be open to that. It might not be full, but they might give you half your value back in vouchers. And it works for the store, works for you. Win-win, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
What's the best way to promote an event? Let's say I've set up the event, I've done all this great work, and now I'm ready to tell the world about my awesome event. How do you promote the event? And let's assume that you don't have a podcast or a YouTube channel.
Start drama on Twitter.
I was going to say that. Start drama on Twitter.
Make people talk about your event.
Start drama so everyone blocks you, and then you can't reach anyone. I don't know. I don't know, Anthony. What is the best way to promote an event? Because I think you're all over MySpace. You're all over Bebo. I've had a singing.
Is Bebo still a thing?
I don't know. You would know out of all of us. I've had a singing telegram at my office this week saying that Sydney GT is coming up. So, yeah. Basically, if it's a local event, get your locals. Like if it's an event at a store, get them to put it on their Facebook page and talk about it. Maybe like once a week until they, just a post once a week, just reminding people that it's happening. If you basically, I think pretty much every region in Australia now has a Facebook group that is dedicated to their AOS community. Sydney's is huge and covers pretty much most of Australia, not just Sydney. There's a Queensland one. There's like a Southeast Queensland one. The Northmen have one. Bendigo Boys. There's a Melbourne one, South Australia, whatever. Get in that group and shout out about your event. Let people know it's coming up. You might live in some obscure part of your state and think that nobody's going to pay attention, but you'll find a couple of people on there that you may not have met before that will be interested in coming to your event. The first ever event that I ran in Toowoomba was like 12 players, but we had folks come from Brisbane who I'd never met before, and they're like, they'd seen that there was this AOS event happening in Toowoomba, an hour and a half drive away. They're like, cool, we'll go to that. And now, those people are, they are integral to the scene, So Facebook groups are a really good thing to do. The Australian Age of Sigmar group has an event calendar, which is really good. Lets people know when events coming up. It's also really good for when you're on a schedule your event, because it tells you when all the taken weekends are already. But yeah, if you get your event on there, it gets shouted out on stuff as well. So
that's where I get that list that I showed you guys earlier. And I'm sure there are other creators out there who are stealing that. I'll shout out for our international reps as well. Places like TGA. Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people use TGA, especially the overseas guys.
Okay.
I want to ask Nick in a second, but even Michael Thompson called out, go to CanCon and tell everyone. I think there's two folds in that. One, get to know people. I think the more that you're meeting people and having either online conversations or offline conversations, the moment they see that, Liam's putting on an event and they know Liam, they like Liam, they trust Liam to a degree.
Who are these people?
Well, there's probably a couple of them out there. But if they did like Liam and trust Liam and they're like, oh, Liam's putting on an event, or maybe, because Liam's a nice guy, he might shout it out to on his Twitter or his Instagram, get him to help you spread the word as well. If I was setting up an event for the first time, I'd use someone like Dan AOS Shorts and be like, hey, man, can you shout out my event? Tell the world. Tap into people to help amplify that message.
Yeah.
It's networking, and we did it for Lord of War, because a bunch of the people who were at Lord of War we hadn't really seen before, and we at CanCon, we launched 3. I think we sold tickets 2 weeks after CanCon, and at CanCon we would talk to people and we'd say, hey, we're running an event in a couple of weeks, keep an eye on it, Lord of War, this is what we're trying to achieve. So you just network, you talk to people. But one of the points you raised earlier, Coach, was the have a podcast. You don't even need to have one. You don't even need to have one, because, and you guys will be the same. If someone messages us at the Dwellers and say, hey, I'm running an event in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, this is the event, can you give me a shout out? We'll do it, and we'll happily shout it out, because we want to see the scene grow. And exactly what you did at the start of this show was you showed the upcoming calendar. And so get yourself on that calendar. Even if you're not, doing a podcast or creating content, send us a message, and send Clint a message, send Anthony a message. They'll mention you on their show, and people will listen to that and go, okay, cool, that's something to keep an eye on. And you don't have to pay money for that kind of stuff. It's easy, because we want to see the scene grow, and we'll shout out events all the time.
Yeah, and I was obviously joking about that, but last year I ran three events: the team event, the narrative event, and my first GT, and that was before how long have I had this channel for? It's very early on in the channel. It was very early on. I didn't have a large audience at that time, but I think use the content creators out there, and I've shown you already a list of either podcasters and people like Gabe who have a blog. Use people who are really good on Twitter and Instagram. Hit up those Facebook groups. There are large voices you can tap into. Scale, Liam.
Yeah.
You gonna say something?
No, I'm literally just like saying like TGA and all that stuff, and I literally just got a notification from TGA. I was like, oh, so weird. We literally talked about that.
Ben, I hear whispers that Ben Curry might have new scenery dice in the next 2 weeks. Just maybe that's what that message is about.
No, he was literally telling me to go to his Blood and Glory event. I'm like, no, not happening.
Is he telling you to get accommodation for it?
Yeah.
That was the funniest last year. But
there's marketing, and then there's like too much marketing, right?
Then there's the Ben Curry version of marketing. By the way, Blood and Glory was excellent 2 years ago. I would definitely go back.
Confirmed Warhammer hero Ben Curry. Let's look at it.
Well, I met him prior to being a Warhammer hero, so maybe he's got the ego. No.
What do we reckon? We're going to nominate Clint this year?
Yeah, we'll nominate Clint.
No, I feel like he's past it. I'm ready to nominate. I want to nominate Smorgan.
Maybe if you'd made CanCon 300 nomination.
Yeah, maybe if you made CanCon 300, you got a chance.
Smorgan has like 4 Twitter accounts. I feel like he has got a larger voice in the community than Clint now.
All right, Smorgan for president.
Smorgan Haiku, Smorgan Daily
Smorgan, Haiku Smorgan, and the disappointing real Smorgan.
Actually,
Ken started with one photo.
Yeah.
Ken's actually raised a point. I said a tournament calendar would be awesome. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan AOS Shorts has started putting together a calendar.
He's got that, yeah.
So Dan's got an international one, and in the Warhammer Australia Age of Sigmar Australia group, there's one for Australian events, and that's the one that we shout out at the end of every Herald's episode. So, yeah,
get on there.
Get into that group, Ken, and then you'll see all the tournaments.
Now, I know Nick has to get off very soon, and I feel like we're kind of starting to wrap up, but there's one question that I want to ask maybe before Liam wants to ask any further ones. But I guess the last question I want to throw to you guys from myself would be, what lessons have you learned from being a TO that either a new TO may not be conscious of or aware of, or a lesson that you've learned over time that you'd want to share?
Well, Nick can go first because he has to go soon.
I do have to scoot. Probably just keeping it simple, and it's a similar thing that I've been talking about all this episode. Is keep it simple, get the fundamentals correct, and then once you've kind of, events aren't that difficult to run. At their core, they're not that difficult to run. Some people get a bit scared about running them. Get your reps in, get in. It's a really rewarding day. And that's the biggest thing for me, is it's a really rewarding day or 2 days. You come away from it going, wow, I did that. That was great. Everyone had a good time. So get the practice in, run small ones, get in there, and, don't be afraid of it, because it's good. It's rewarding. It's not that difficult, but there are plenty of mistakes to make. So start simple and you'll pick them up, because most of the mistakes, once you've started doing it, they're pretty obvious. But if you haven't done it before, sometimes they can catch you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, I'll love you and leave you. Thank you very much, Coach, for having me on the show. Liam, was great to see you last week. Clint, we'll catch up. And
you'll probably see more of me.
And Nick, if people want to find you outside of this show, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the Dwellers Below podcast, which is thedwellersbelow.net, also at the Dwellers Cast on Twitter. We haven't had an episode in like 2 months because I've been overseas, but we're hopefully recording this weekend. So yeah, get on that. At Some Call It Luck, the father of lies on Twitter, and yeah, on Facebook, the Dwellers Below. Hopefully we'll see you there.
We'll see you at CanCon. Indeed.
Thank you very much for having me, and good luck for Sydney GT. Unfortunately, it was too close to my big Europe trip that I couldn't head up there. I'll hopefully be up at Runex, so we'll hopefully have a Dwellers team. So hopefully we'll see heaps of people there, because that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good one. But we haven't wrapped up chat. We're just going to drop Nick off. So thanks very much.
Love you guys.
See you, mate.
Don't fail your strength test.
Well, it's really big me. So Clint, what things have you learnt as a TO that someone may not have learnt yet?
Do not bite off more than you can chew. It may seem like a good idea to bake your first event a 2-day GT or something like that. Don't do that. Run a store event. Run a small 1-dayer. Run something nice and simple, because you will learn lessons from that whether it's how well you schedule, how well people in your area respond to events. It was interesting. The first time I ever ran an event, breaking my own rules, I ran a 2-dayer. And unfortunately, so what had happened was we had a TO in Toowoomba who was running events, had left a really bad taste in people's mouths. He'd taken people's money and disappeared and things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. So when it came time for me to run an event, people were like, well, Toowoomba is,
dodgy.
Do I want to waste my time, even though this is a different guy? So instead of having the 30-odd people who had said that they would come to this event, I had 20. So, yeah, it was a bit much to do all at once. And if I had my time again, I'd just run something simple. But I think organization, every year I learn how to organize certain aspects of the tournament better. And that's what I learn every year, is to just make sure I'm super organized. And every year something I haven't thought of isn't quite as organized, and I just tweak that as I go along. So
Yeah.
So-
and Lee, what about yourself from your first event that you ran? What did you learn?
Well, I got some people to give me feedback about my event, and they said actually you did quite good, because mine was like 24 people. It was like manageable, and everyone, most of the players there knew what to do in an event, which kind of helped out. And that makes sense. Like there was like 3 people where it was like their first event, so everyone kind of like helped them out, and they were like my focus to like just give them a heads up. But I think the one thing is, if you're running at a venue, please chat to the kitchen, because I know that there's some TOs that have had this experience where the kitchen ran, I think, 45 minutes late. And as we talked about earlier, if you can't, like, you lose time, like, and stuff. So I can't emphasize that. So when I ran my event and I knew that happened, I literally, first thing I did was like, where's the kitchen at? I'm going to tell them, blah, blah, blah. And like getting on people's case about that. So that's if you're running at a venue. Places like CanCon, I know Clint, it's self-efficient. Like they go sort that out. That's not your thing. Like they finish the game on time and then go off and then they come back. Like it's the players kind of thing. Like that's not on you. But if you're running an event at a venue, that's it. So I know Magro, you're probably going to be telling people, if you finish a game, go order food, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and yeah, I was going to say this probably goes in nicely to what Nick was saying about organizing food for the players by batch ordering pizzas or Subway platters or something. You're actually able to shave that time down because you know that the kitchen's not going to get smashed and you're a bit more in control. But on the flip side, if people have finished their games, you might want to say, guys, go order your food so you don't have that wait. At the same time, I'm at Canterbury Leagues, which again is a massive, massive venue, which has more than one cafeteria and restaurant. So I know that they can handle it. But if I was concerned that they couldn't handle the 100-odd players, then I would just need to make sure that my lunch break was larger. Or I need to find ways to sharpen up that time, which kind of goes into a question that I know, Liam, you're going to answer from the chat.
Okay, so Tristan asked us round times 2.5 or 2:45. My answer is 2:45, just because I know for a fact as a player, especially a competitive player, when I go through my opponent's list, I spend 10 minutes running through my list and their list and deployment and getting the scenario down pat. Like that's for me. And also that extra 15 minutes is important because I do know that it sucks when you run out of time, and most times all you need is that extra 10, 15 minutes to get an actual perfect score, or like the right score, if that makes sense. Because I know in some scenarios you need 3 turns or 4 turns to actually get a score or like a final thing result. So yeah, that's my answer to it. Clint, your thoughts? 2.5 or 2:45?
2:45. Look, I'd love 3. But just that makes the day so long. Not just for TOs, but also for players. Like there's a lot of brain work that goes into playing Warhammer, and by the end of the day, you might have just stood around for all of your day, but you are tired. And 3 hour times is for 2,000 points is probably, it's also possibly just a tad too long. So it's 2 hours 50 is probably the right amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
my thoughts are, it depends on your audience. I know that's not a very helpful answer, but it's thinking about, do you have new players or inexperienced players? Newer players may need more time. How complicated are you going to have the game? Will you be using scenery tables, the Realmscape features, realm spells? Are they custom scenarios? Are they scenarios that you're announcing on the day? Some tournaments will announce each round by round, or some will tell them which 5 scenarios they're playing well in advance. So if you are going to go down this 2.5 to 245, you need to find efficiencies. You might, as a tournament organizer, have each of the pieces of terrain already labeled for the table, whether it's mysterious or arcane. You may look for efficiencies like having a cheat sheet and the scenarios in advance, and they can have something on the day, so they're not flicking through books. And what I've done is I've collated the Realmscape features with the scenario on a 1-pager, so that they're not flipping between books and they're not getting confused. It's just clean, and they can also practice in advance. So, and also might think about the venue. I know some venues may not open till 10 o'clock, or, you don't want people to go into their dinner break. So think of your audience, think of your location, think about the game that you want to run. 245, I think, is better, but yeah.
So Magro, for your event, you're doing 2,500 points.
Mm-hmm.
How long's yours?
3 hours 15.
3 hours 15. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we found that as well is I asked the players. I said, guys, do you want to do 3 hours, 3:15, or 3.5?
3:15.
3:15 is where we landed, because again, I asked the players, and that was the majority. But you got to remember, if we do, let's say, 3.5 hours, we do that by 3 games on the first day, which is Saturday. We're at what? Plus a lunch break.
10 hours.
Plus a lunch break, we're almost at the 12-hour mark. That's not considering registration and the breaks in between. Do people want to do 12 hours? It's a long day, and then come back for day 2? Probably not.
No.
So it's one of the considerations.
Yeah, cool. To answer Tristan just did say it's for most people doing their third 20. I say 2 hours 45. And that's just me, because I do know that I spend, especially in the current moment with my record, I need to be super clear with my rules, and also me and Magro are working on my presentation on my list. So pretty much I had to explain it, and I think most people are the same, where they want to explain their rules correctly, so you don't feel bad for getting a gotcha kind of moment by accident, if that makes sense.
Well, another great example could be, I know AOS Reminders, which is a website that's out there, allows you to create a cheat sheet. So again, to help speed up play, you might look for resources like that, or give them tokens to mark the terrain features. Just finding efficiency, so they've got more game time.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that helps you out, Tristan. Tristan does say thanks. One question I do really want to ask, because Clint, I think you have probably experienced this, especially in the past year. Have you ever had to handle player conflict, and what did you do?
There's been player conflict on certain different things. What sort of, are we talking in-game conflict or out-of-game conflict, or
all the conflict?
All of the conflict. Okay.
All the conflict that there's a high chance that I may have gotten involved in.
Look, I think it's a case of listening to both players' cases, and then coming to a fairly quick decision as far as the conflict is generally about a rules or an interaction at the table. So coming coming to a quick decision about that is fairly vital. That's something I learned in my first event. I ummed and ahed on a ruling, and it kind of just got a little bit out of hand. And I've been fairly strict on that after that, sort of up going forward. I think when it comes to any of that sort of stuff, whether it be players cheating or something like that, doing something I think is super important, because there's been some events where behavior has been reported or things have happened and there's been no action taken. So that spirals out and becomes stories, and people talk about it and things like that. So
And it passes on to other events, yeah.
It passes on to other events, or certain people have reps after that. So basically, doing something about it, I think, is super important. We have some interesting stuff happening at CanCon this year with the gentleman who had decided to neck a couple of bottles of vodka, apparently, during his games, and was not able to play correctly. So that was a different sort of conflict where we had to escort him out of the venue and make sure that he didn't come back, which he tried to do several times. We had to kind of keep ushering him out so it didn't become a thing. It was not certainly what I had anticipated starting that day. So that's a different conflict. Yes. I think trying to be incredibly fair, listening to both sides of the story, and making a decision quickly as you can, and then if perhaps making a decision at the time is more important than taking 10 minutes and trying to make the absolute watertight best decision. Does that make sense? Like taking 2 minutes to go, okay, well, it looks like this rule, this says this, and the FAQ says this, then we have to go it this way. And then if you find out later that that's not correct, unfortunately, you just have to apologize, and that's what you do. But if you take 20 minutes to look up every forum and every FAQ and this, that's going to that's not going to work well. So
yeah, I know that you and I'm going to put this out, that one thing that you did, I got me and a player called Lee from New Zealand. We had an issue where we submitted our pack, and then I think Lee and his group worked out where we played scenario wrong, and then you got put in a position to make a decision, right? And I think the way we handled it was probably the fairest way, or like not dealing with like a bad taste, if that makes sense. Even though I yelled, but because it wasn't in my favor. But I think that kind of conflict, though, like managing that is probably like really important to a TO. And I think you did it quite well, because you're like, let's chat, see what we want to do, and then we all came to an agreement, and then we moved on. If that makes sense. Like, I think
this was after we found you, because you were missing, even though you should have been there at the venue.
I was cool. Anyways,
look, that certainly didn't help things. But no, what you said there is, and I think players just need to accept that calls are made, and you can discuss about them later. But getting on with stuff is more important.
Yeah, and Ken's raised an excellent point, which is something that we all do on a frequent basis, and that is just roll the dice if it comes down to it.
Funny you say that, Ken.
That's the only thing that, in this particular instance with Lee and Liam, it was the only thing that we could do, because time had moved on. There was time had moved on. There were some other considerations. So in the end, we just had to 50-50 it, because there was no either way somebody was going to feel bad. And we just
we rolled off to see whoever rolled higher, and we're like, cool, that's it, done, moved on.
Something
and
like that,
and then we also had conflict at Masters, and then you also handled that really well, which was good. And I think that's probably the toughest thing for a TO is like dealing with conflict. And I know that I think in Sydney Slaughter we almost had a punch on. Yeah,
look, conflict happens. some players just rub each other the wrong way. I think it's just, we're forcing interaction, and unfortunately, whether it's a manner, whether, someone might think they're rude, or they've seen something about them online, or they don't like the army and it's just, put in a bad position, or maybe they've had a bad day before they got to the event. Like, conflict happens. We need to accept that we need to show strong leadership and make tough calls. Tyson made a really good comment, is just sticking to your calls.
Absolutely.
And know that you're going to make mistakes. It happens in sports. It happens in business. It's going to happen here. And I think we as players all appreciate and recognize that if you are doing things not biased, you are listening to both sides and making the best decision with the information that you have. It's a tough call, but unfortunately it has to happen. Don't let it get into a punch on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like, I know for a fact, for me, I've rubbed countless people the wrong way. But has
communities.
Look, I've improved quite well. But yeah, like, and I remember at CanCon, I had an opportunity to make a better, like, pretty much fix it. And I do remember that matchup, and everyone who was at Masters were like literally getting the popcorn ready because they're expecting a second show. And yeah, and then like when you rub someone off the runway, you just try and make it fixed. And that's probably the best way. And the best thing was, like, none of the TOs. Oh no, wait, I think one TO did say, I forgot who it was, said, like, Liam, can you try and make this the best outcome possible? Because we don't want another run like Masters. And then like that was it. And then like I think both me and that player's reputation then was fixed, where everyone's like, oh, they're not as bad, if that makes sense. And I think that was really cool. But yeah. Next question. When you got started with running event, I know, Clint, you started making terrain last year. Is that
Sorry?
right? You started making terrain last year for like last year's CanCon. Like, I remember you did pretty much started doing your own terrain when you less relied on other people. If that makes sense.
I've made terrain for every year.
Every year? Okay.
Right back from when I was running stuff in 8th edition.
Okay, cool. So how much of it now have you went from borrowing people's terrain to now it's your own?
Okay. So the first 2 years we did it mostly us, with just a couple of borrowed tables and things like that. This year, for 2019, we doubled in size, and a bunch of communities decided, like, threw up the hands and said, look, well, we can give you 10 tables, or we can do this or that. That was really cool. Really appreciated. We had some issues coming out of that, though, unfortunately. Terrain mix-ups. One person who lent me a mat, his went walking, which I don't believe is somebody pinching it. I reckon it's just in somebody's mat stash somewhere that they haven't noticed. So for 2020, we're going back to just our terrain. And so I've been working my butt off to make enough terrain for all of the tables. And obviously GW have come to the party and given us a stack of stuff, which it might have seemed like a huge stack, but when you're doing sort of 5 or so pieces of terrain a table for 120 tables, it didn't sort of go as far as I'd hoped. So yeah, I make terrain all the time.
I mean, if you're a newer TO, obviously it's a lot easier to manage this, and also being accountable for people's stuff. Again, I'm borrowing 5 battle mats from Chris Welfare, so I need to make sure that my inventory and the way I manage my games make sure that I give back those 5 mats the way that Chris gave them to me. A great thing that I saw the Mitzi and Jimbo show guys do at Adepticon was actually made up little coasters for drinks to make sure that everyone had a drink coaster on the table, so people weren't leaving their food and their drink and ruining battle mats. So having those kind of things in mind preserves, but also I'm going to write on the back of the mats with like a silver metal texture, Chris, Deke, anyone who's lent me their battle mats to make sure that I give them back what they've given me. So obviously CanCon 200 players, it's a bit harder to manage inventory, but certainly at a smaller level, don't be afraid to borrow. Just be accountable on what you're borrowing and make sure you give it back the way it was received.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you're running stuff in a store, generally a store will have a bunch of terrain. Anyway, they might have 10 tables, but they might have sort of five AOS and 5 40k. So, you might need to scrape together 5 more AOS tables or something like that. But being able to borrow terrain from a store and things like that is super helpful. And a lot of groups are very a lot of groups and a lot of people are very happy to help out events get the terrain they need, because we all want to play on boards that look good.
Yeah. And a great example is I'm giving Travis a free ticket to Sydney GT because he's bringing up 40 tables for me. So by me giving him $60 worth of value from my ticket, it's the least I could do to pay back what would cost me hundreds of dollars and hours of my life recreating these tables. So, you use reciprocity to give back to those people who are helping you in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything you guys want to call out from like sponsorships and how you're able to, like, Clint, when you speak to your sponsors, how are you approaching them? What are you saying to them? Any advice that you would have around getting sponsorship from companies?
I think the thing that I've sort of learned over the past couple of years is to find people who engage in the Age of Sigmar space and talk to them first and sort of say and talk to them about what them helping you can do for their brand or for their company and things like that. So they might certain game stores do discounts on vouchers and things like that because they do GW product and things like that. Certain brands are very keen to have their mats in on tables and things like that. So they're generally, they're quite generous with that. But even things like, brush companies and or talking to people who make the acrylic products that you're going to be putting them in your players packs already. So if they can add a little logo to the corner of them or something like that, but they're willing to do that and give you, 20 or 30% off the price of the stuff, then that's you helping them get their name out there for other events or other people, like people might order their other products. And it's also making sure that you're making people's money go further. You're getting this prize. This prize money comes essentially, it's the players' money that you're working with, and if you can make that stretch by working with your sponsors, that's a good thing for everyone. So
yeah, sick.
Yeah, the advice that I would give, I think.
So Anthony, do you want to tell a funny story about one of your sponsors that happened the other day?
No, I would rather not. All I would say is persistence pays off. But more importantly, the advice that I give TO is I think I've been quite successful with the amount of sponsors I have for Sydney GT. I'm actually, when I look at it, I'm quite overwhelmed and hashtag blessed just with the sheer amount. But I think you've got to ask. If you don't ask, you don't receive. So be open to rejection. Know that things take time. But more importantly as well, you need to think about what's in it for me. If I'm the Games Cube, if I'm Deep Cut Studios, if I'm McDonald's or Bunnings or whoever you're going to ask, but it's true. Like if whoever you're going to ask, you need to think about what is the benefit to that company. It's not a charity. It's not like, hey, can you give me some free product? It's that you're going to give me free product, and in return, I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z. If you can help make their life easier by telling them, I would like you to sponsor my painting award, and with the painting award, this is what I want from you, whether it's some examples from their catalog, that helps a lot. In fact, the most successful I've had is I've told them what I want from them, and how I'm going to give them value. So I'm going to put their logo on my players pack. I'm going to announce their sponsorship. I'll send them photos back after the event. I will announce their name when I give out the award. If they send me flyers or discount coupons, I'll put them in a little pack when the player registers with me. That's just some things that I can add value to. It costs me nothing. If they have some certain requests, so one of my companies that I'm working with has a certain request, I will do the best that I can to fulfill that request. But otherwise, most people are pretty okay to get involved, or they're just not in a position. But I go back to them next year and they're actually in a better position, and they've now jumped on. So, and if that person knocked you back, go to their competitors. I'm sure you can search for their competitors, and if it's not Deep Cut Studios, you've got Fat Mats, you've got GameMat.eu. There's so many, Saucerman Studios. That's just one of many mat companies. So you could replicate that with your hobby gear, with your, if it's if Windsor and Newton's not going to sponsor you, maybe it's Artist Opus, or again, it's think about everything that's in your hobby. Hell, I even reached out to the company that I use. I get my 3D filament from. Unfortunately, we couldn't come to an agreement this year, but next year I'm going to go at them and try to get them on board, because hell, I've spent over $500 on material to make terrain.
Yep.
That's me. And think about value. Think about just get straight to the point. Like there, just tell them what you want.
Yeah. I think for me, when I get in a goodie pack, some of them would give them a voucher being 10% off or 50% off kind of thing. And that what gets players to do is literally go onto that website and see what they got. Miss Miniatures, I think, was the most common one a year or two. And
Dark Fantastic Mills, for example, is given a really good discount. And Gary from Dark Fantastic Mills is actually going to send the 3D printed terrain to me at Sydney GT so people can collect. So not only is he getting product, but also I'm going to save on shipping, and also I'm able to give people stuff on the day. And Gary can obviously see that sales that are directly coming from my event. So next year I could ask even more.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Anything where if you just ask them oh, hey, can I get some vouchers and stuff? That's pretty much marketing for them, for that company. It's just something so simple. So yeah. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. Is there anything else to add in, or anything else to shout out, Clint, that you want to mention for any beginner TOs?
Not really. I think we've probably gone over quite a lot here, and in a lot of detail. So
sick. Magro, anything?
My only advice, really, the last thing I'd probably say that I haven't really directly said is that when you're putting out an event, work backwards. Think about who is my target audience at my event. Is it top tier competitive players? Is it the people who just want to play Warhammer for a weekend and roll dice and have fun? Is it the painters? Who is my target audience? Build your event for that target audience. So Sydney GT for me is about the middle of the pack. I obviously offer something of value to the top tier players, the people who want to smash face and get first, second, and third. But what I want the most is the people in the middle of the pack who are 2 and 3 and 3 and 2. They win a couple of games, they lose a couple of games. I want them to walk away and have a great time, introduce their friends and play Warhammer, and then come to other events like Slaughter, like CanCon, like Gods of War, like all the different events, and create a space for people who want to paint. I'm giving out an award for what's called the Meta Buster, so someone who does really well with an army that isn't meta. Maybe they're running around with Scourge Privateers, or they're running around with the Deadly as Ever Gutbusters, and they do really well. I want to give them a prize. They're not running Slaanesh or Daughters, but think about the experience and think about what you're trying to achieve. And Sydney GT for me is getting Sydney active, getting people having fun, focusing on their hobby, and growing the scene. And I think I've grown about 40 to 50 players year on year. and I think everyone wins.
Yeah.
On the flip side, CanCon's not necessarily about that. CanCon is, I guess, for me, a celebration. It's everything that kickstarts the year. It's the thing that everyone comes and travels from Australia and New Zealand to meet up with old friends and meet new friends and roll dice. And, I don't think Clint overcomplicates things, but at the same time, he just executes very well.
Yeah. Perfect.
So,
Sick.
Clint, anything else you want to add?
No, I think you've talked for me enough there. That's fine.
Horace is trying to get me to run the Masters. Unfortunately, Horace, I'm not invited, or I'm not aware of being on the Masters committee to do commentary this year. If maybe Joel's still on here, maybe they can hire me to do commentary again. I'm not aware.
I think that's why Wes keeps talking about the GoFundMe. It's to fly you and he apparently to Masters to do commentary. I believe that's what that is.
All right, yeah, damn straight. Wes and I do commentary. Good lord, we had a lot of fun at Bruce Hammer Game 5, Caradron versus Gloomspite. I would happily play Wes again. God, we'd talk some shit on the internet. This has been awesome. I think we've learned a lot. I think this is a topic that we could talk a lot about. I think to wrap things up, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at all the successful tournaments that are out there. Use your Google Foo to search for players pack, whether it's the South Coast GTs, the CanCons, the Bobos of the world, whether it's the Sydney Slaughters, whether it's the Midwest Meltdowns, the Adepticons, the Sydney GTs, the Nova Opens. There are so many events out there now that you can find something that sounds like the event that you want to run.
Yeah.
Pick the brains, whether it's a narrative event and you talk to the likes of Aaron Bossian, who, or you look for anyone on Twitter called a Neo, whether it's someone who's in the Masters committee and doing well, or it's someone who's running a huge event, like the likes of the CanCon. There is a wealth of information out there. Tap into it. More events. I want to see more events, and I want to hear more great stories. So I feel all nice and warm and fuzzy, and now I need to go turn on my 3D printers and go on the home stretch for Sydney GT.
It never ends.
So, Clint, where can people find you?
Rightio. People can find me on the Heralds of War podcast. If you listen to podcasts and you don't listen to us, very disappointed in you. You can find me on Twitter at Heralds of War, on Facebook, facebook.com/Heralds of War. If you are curious about CanCon, if you go to heraldsofwar.com/CanCon, you can find a link to the event pack, the Facebook event, all that sort of stuff. Basically, as we do things, they're going to go up on the website there as well. Tickets for CanCon on sale on the 1st of October. Only 240 of them.
I also want to thank all the Patreons again, whether it's Kenny, Chaos Spawn, Matthew, Priestley, Tyler Pearson, Clint Mallet. Thank you for being a Patreon. David Belina, Doom of Darkness, Dwight Crow, Jonathan Ensor, and Reflex Dog Training. I love that Twitter. He's always got pictures of dogs, and it's my favorite. Thank you everyone who's contributed. I think this has been a great show. I think it's hopefully a resource that people can tap into. And again, hit us all up on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram if you have any questions about your event, or if you're running an event. Make sure that we know so we can shout it out and help you get as many participants as possible.
Sick. I'm excited already, and it's so weird that it's only like 5 months away.
Yeah,
5 months. Yeah,
I've started my display board, Clint. I've got my my plans ready to go, and I know what I'm doing for my display board. All about the free people, the cities of Sigmar. So, Adjum Gaming has asked, "Are we excited?" Damn straight, free people, they're back.
What I was going to say was, what is it?
5 months. For the record, Liam, it is closer than that.
Reflex Dog Training. Make sure to come down to Midwest Meltdown, because I think I'm going to be there. So that's July next year. So I'll be at Midwest Meltdown in Illinois.
Sick.
Cool. All right, we're wrapping up, guys. Clint, Shadowhammer, Nick, Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe I'll finally get off my ass and release this as a podcast. All right. Peace out.
So yeah.
Peace.